I hit record and skipped the smile. I said, "I lied to you." The words landed like glass in my throat and scattered across the room. The ring light hummed as if it were waiting for a prettier confession. Ava said, "The captions you loved were not mine." My chest tightened at the memory of clean sentences I never earned. Marcus said, "No one cares who wrote it, they care that it sells." I believed him until I did not. Lila said, "You can stop, Ava," but the posts kept coming like tides I could not command. Sloan echoed me online and sharpened every rumor. The crowd swelled, praised, and turned when they sensed blood. I kept smiling for them. I said, "A stranger built my voice while I watched myself vanish." The script on my phone felt heavier than the phone itself. I wanted to speak without a scaffold. The ghost whispered that I already had. I said, "This is not a rebrand. This is a reckoning." The silence after that line felt honest. It also felt like falling. The first time I borrowed a voice, I told myself it was temporary. The deadline was brutal, and my head was hollow. Marcus said, "We can outsource the caption." And he slid a contact across the table like a bandage. I agreed because the applause was louder than my shame. The words arrived polished, and the likes arrived louder. Lila said, "It still sounds like you, but I heard the echo of a stranger." I learned to schedule posts the way people schedule apologies. I said, "I will write the next one myself," and then I did not. The crowd loved the cadence more than the truth. Sloan circled and mimicked my phrasing until I could not tell who led. I pressed publish and felt smaller each time. The ghost asked what I feared more, losing the mask or losing myself. I looked away from mirrors that knew my answer. Deals stacked up after the first viral confession that was not mine. Brand managers praised the tone and asked for more of the same. Marcus said, "Consistency sells," and I learned that consistency can be a cage. Lila said, "You sound tired," but I had no proof of effort. I posted during flights and pretended I was free. Sloan mirrored my edits with a brighter laugh. The crowd begged for morning routines and night routines and the routine of my damage. I smiled and fed the algorithm like a faithful pet. I said, "I am still here," though the page looked hollow. The ghost said the page was full of someone else. I nodded at a kindness I could not yet afford. Oh, the contracts used to thrill me. I loved the clean fonts and the future they promised. Marcus said, "Sign now, refine later," and later never arrived. Lila said, "Read the clause on content ownership," and I laughed like a rookie. The document owned my voice, or at least the version they could sell. I said, "I can renegotiate," and the room smirked back. Sloan posted a snide reel about authenticity, and the crowd clapped. I envied her shamelessness and feared my own. The ghost whispered that I had traded truth for timestamps. I thought about the girl who used to write at night without likes. I could not remember her last sentence. I signed another page and felt it sign me. The crack arrived during a live Q&A when a follower asked what book shaped my voice. I stalled and felt the script collapse. I said, "The one I have not finished," and the chat stuttered. Lila texted a heart that felt like a life ring. Marcus said, "Pivot to product," but I could not pivot from myself. Sloan clipped the moment and posted it with a wink. The crowd argued whether I was human or a headline. The ring light warmed my cheeks while my chest cooled. I said, "I hired a ghostwriter," and watched the viewer count jump like a fire. The ghost did not smile. She only nodded and finally breathed. Ava said, "They followed me but not really me." The silence after the stream clung heavier than the applause. I scrolled through comments, drowning in emojis that never touched my skin. Marcus said, "Engagement is up. We won." I wondered who the we was. Lila whispered on a call, "You sound empty," and her voice cracked like glass. I admitted I could not remember the last time I wrote something honest. The crowd adored the mask, not the person beneath. Sloan laughed in her stories, replaying my stumble with a smug tilt of her lips. I said, they love her, not me, and the ghost whispered, she is not you. I tried to sleep, but the likes pulsed like a heartbeat I did not own. Morning came with stale coffee and unread drafts. I said, maybe today I write my own words. The cursor blinked like a dare. Marcus barged into the call, crisp and rehearsed, saying, we stick to the formula. Ava, ... I clenched my jaw and nodded, though my stomach turned. Lila said, you don't have to sound like her, and I envied her faith. Sloane posted a reel mocking authenticity with a laugh track, her followers swelling. The crowd chimed with praise for her boldness and pity for my stumble. I whispered, I am not hollow, yet the room did not believe me. The ghost said softly, then prove it, and I stared at the blank page with trembling hands. I rehearsed sentences out loud, but none sounded like mine. I said, hello, it's me, and hated the falseness of it. Lila said, start with the truth, but the truth felt too raw to post. Marcus texted metrics and graphs, the numbers drowning my breath. The crowd's comments replayed in my skull, demanding I be perfect and broken at once. Sloane thrived in my silence, her posts dripping with mock sincerity. I sat on the floor, words stuck in my throat. I said, if they see me, will they leave? The ghost whispered, if they never see you, you will leave yourself. I pressed record and stared, unblinking, not ready yet. A brand manager called to congratulate me on my latest post. I smiled through the receiver and said, thank you, though shame burned. Marcus laughed. See, they do not care who wrote it. My stomach knotted. Lila asked later, do you even read the words before they go live? I admitted sometimes I did not. The crowd praised me for honesty I had not earned. Sloane sent a sly DM, impressive work, almost like a real writer. I nearly threw my phone. I said, I am losing myself, and the ghost whispered, you already lost her when you stopped writing. The echo hollowed me until I could barely breathe. That night, I opened my notebook, the one I had not touched in months. Pages smelled of ink and dust. I said, maybe I can start small. I wrote a single line and hated how stiff it felt. Lila messaged, whatever you write will matter, and I wished I believed her. Marcus demanded copy for a new campaign by morning. The crowd celebrated my curated posts without knowing the silence I drowned in. Sloane uploaded a story mocking writers who fake it. My chest tightened. I whispered, I cannot keep this up. The ghost leaned closer in the dark, whispering, then stop lying, and for the first time, I did not dismiss her. The walls of my apartment felt like witnesses to every word I had not written. Marcus said, use the noise, Ava, spin it before it dies. His voice was sharp like glass cutting air. I stared at my screen and the cursor blinked like a warning light. Lila messaged, don't let him turn your shame into content. I wanted to believe her, but the deadlines pressed like hands around my throat. The crowd's comments poured in, some cheering, some tearing at my skin with each sentence. Sloane mocked me again, saying, her brand is breakdown chic. I said, I cannot keep patching myself with strangers' words. The ghost whispered, you are already bleeding from them. My chest shook with a truth I could no longer cage. I pressed record, but instead of smiling, I stayed silent. The silence carried more weight than anything I had ever posted. The agency office smelled of ambition and burnt coffee. Marcus said, your rawness is marketable, lean into it. I hated how he shaped my pain into a pitch deck. I said, this is not strategy, this is survival, but no one listened. The crowd's demands echoed from a wall of screens showing comments in real time. Lila called during the meeting, begging me to walk out before I drowned. My hands shook under the table. Sloane's latest reel played silently on another monitor. My face frozen mid-confession. I wanted to rip the plug out of the wall. The ghost whispered, stand before you vanish. I stood up, every chair squeaking like alarm bells. Marcus said, sit down or lose everything. I turned away and left. The slam of the door sounded like my first real line. I found Lila at the cafe where we once dreamed without followers watching. She said, "Remember when you wrote just for yourself?" Her smile trembled, but her voice steadied me. I said, "I miss that girl, but she feels like a ghost." She reached across the table, warm fingers grounding me. My phone buzzed with Marcus's 5th call. Ignored again. The crowd roared online, their comments filling spaces we used to leave for laughter. Sloan uploaded another dig, this time mocking my handwriting as if honesty were a costume. I said, "If I write one true sentence tonight, it will belong to me." Lila nodded and whispered, "That's all you need." The ghost leaned closer, not as an enemy but as a mirror. For the first time, I believed I could face her. That night, I sat at my desk with a page filled only by hesitation. I said one true sentence, over and over until it landed on paper. The words looked jagged, but alive. Marcus sent edits that cut the heart out of it, saying, "We can't risk honesty this raw." I deleted his message and pressed publish. My hands trembled as the post went live. The crowd exploded instantly, some praising the courage, others sharpening their knives. Sloan mocked it with a stitched video, but I ignored her this time. Lila texted, "You did it," and I felt my lungs expand. The ghost whispered, "Stay here, this is yours." For once, I did not retreat into silence. The words were sharp, imperfect, and mine. The backlash came like a storm, faster than I could breathe. Marcus called shouting, "Delete it now before brands pull out." I muted him. Lila said, "Hold steady, Ava," and her voice steadied me. The crowd split down the middle, half cheering, half calling me fraud. Sloane's smirk spread across her feed as she asked if truth was just another gimmick. I said, "I can live without contracts, but not without myself." The ghost whispered, "This is the first time you sound alive." My hands stopped shaking. The numbers dipped, then slowed, and I realized silence would no longer own me. I closed my laptop and felt a stillness that belonged to me. I said, "Even if I vanish online, I will not vanish inside." The words lingered, stronger than applause. I thought the worst was behind me until I saw the leaked emails. My name was stamped on drafts I never touched. Marcus said, "Damage control, Ava, will deny everything." My stomach knotted as I read words signed with my ghost. Lila whispered, "They forged you," and her voice shook like paper in wind. The crowd lit torches online demanding answers I didn't have. Sloan said, "She never wrote a word, and now you know." I said, "This isn't just betrayal. This is theft." The ghost whispered, "They stole me long before you noticed." My pulse thundered in my ears as I realized the mask had been weaponized against me. I pressed record again, but this time, no script sat beside me. I said, "Every word you loved was borrowed, and the ones you hate might be too." Silence fell heavier than applause. The phone rang non-stop, Marcus shouting through static, "We bury this, Ava, or you're done." His words burned like threats, not advice. I said, "I am already done if I keep lying." He cursed and hung up. Lila said, "Then tell them the whole truth." My hands trembled as I typed my confession, not polished, not perfect. The crowd was frothing with rage and curiosity, dissecting timelines and posts. Sloan fed the fire with clips, mocking every stumble. I whispered, "I cannot erase the ghost, but I can show the girl who was buried." The ghost whispered back finally. My finger hovered over publish, knowing once I pressed it, there was no way back. I pressed anyway. My chest cracked open like thunder. The backlash roared like a tidal wave. Brands severed ties in hours. Marcus said, "You just killed your career," his text glowing with venom. I said, "Maybe it was already dead." Lila messaged, "I'm proud of you." And I clung to her words like oxygen. The crowd tore apart my persona, some screaming betrayal, others thanking me for honesty. Sloan went live, smirking. I built mine alone, twisting the knife deeper. I sat in silence, my chest hollow but strangely lighter. The ghost whispered, "Now they see the wound, not just the mask." I wiped my eyes, unsure if they were tears of loss or freedom. For the first time, I didn't rush to fix perception. I let the storm rage without covering my ears. I scrolled through the chaos until one comment stopped me cold. A fan wrote, "We loved the ghost, but maybe we can love you too." My throat tightened, breath caught. Lila said, "That's the anchor, Ava, not the storm." I said, "But what if they leave when they see all of me?" She replied, "Then they were never here for you." Sloane mocked the message in her story, twisting hope into ridicule. Marcus sent threats of legal fallout, reminding me of contracts inked in haste. I pressed delete on his message. The ghost whispered, "They are starting to see me, not her." For the first time, I wanted them to. The crowd was shifting, not forgiving fully, but pausing long enough to listen. The rival's dagger came sharpest that night. Sloane released a video claiming she had evidence. I never wrote a single word. The crowd gasped, screens lit with scandal. Marcus called again, voice dripping venom, "She'll bury you." I said she might, but I won't keep digging the hole myself. Lila urged, "Fight her lies with your truth." I stared at my notebook and whispered, "This is mine," before snapping a photo of my own handwriting. I posted it raw, ink smudged, page imperfect. The ghost whispered, "Finally, my voice." I braced for silence, but instead the comments filled with stunned quiet and hesitant praise. The page was not pretty, but it was real. And for once, real felt louder than perfect. The storm reached its loudest when Sloane's video went viral overnight. She said, "Here's the proof she's fake," her voice dripping triumph. Marcus called, screaming that I was finished. I said, "Maybe I was never supposed to last this way." The crowd split again, some begging me to fight, others throwing stones. Lila said, "You don't owe them a performance. You owe yourself the truth." My chest burned with panic but steadied at her words. The ghost whispered, "This is the moment you either disappear or begin again." I opened my notebook, scrawled a confession in my own uneven hand, and pressed record without makeup, without lights. I said, "If I am ruined, let it be for my own words." The silence afterward was sharp, but it was mine. The fallout arrived fast. Sponsors withdrew, contracts dissolved. Marcus spat venom over voicemail. "You just cost us millions." I deleted it without replaying. The crowd raged with betrayal, yet pockets of kindness surfaced. Lila messaged, "Let them leave, Ava. You're not for sale anymore." My pulse still rattled, but I felt less hollow. Sloane mocked me again, basking in the wreckage. I said, "If honesty breaks me, at least it was mine." The ghost whispered, "Your voice is bleeding, but it breathes." I sat in the wreckage of brand deals and saw something that looked like freedom glimmer between the ashes. I didn't know if I was strong enough to stand, but I knew I was done kneeling. My follower count plummeted like falling glass. I watched the numbers drop, but did not chase them. The crowd shouted, some mourning the illusion, some applauding the fracture. I whispered, "Let them go." Lila called, her voice steady. "The ones who remain will be the ones who matter." I felt tears streak my face but didn't wipe them. Marcus sent one last message, "You're nothing without me." I did not reply. Sloane celebrated her surge in followers with fireworks in the background of her story. The ghost whispered, "Do you see how little it means if you lose yourself?" I closed the app and stared at my notebook. For the first time, the emptiness felt like space, not a cage. The press vultures circled, calling me liar, fraud, broken brand. Headlines screamed louder than my own posts. I said, "If this is the end, I'll end it on my terms." Lila urged, "Then write it down, Ava, and share it unedited." My hands shook as I wrote through the night. The words weren't pretty, but they carried blood and marrow. The crowd refreshed, waiting for a spin, but I gave them raw bone. Sloane tried to twist it, but her mockery rang hollow against the tremor of my truth. The ghost whispered, You are no longer hiding behind me. My chest cracked with grief but also with release. I said, this is who I am, nothing polished, nothing sold. The climax wasn't noise but silence. I posted my handwritten confession, shaky lines photographed without filters. For minutes the feed was stunned. Then the crowd erupted, some furious, some speechless, some tender. Marcus vanished into silence. Sloane lashed out louder, but her words sounded brittle now. Lila called, voice breaking, you did it. You showed them yourself. The ghost whispered, for the first time, I am not your shadow, I am your spine. I sat on the floor as comments streamed, but for once, they did not define me. I said, even if this ruins me, I am real now. My tears hit the notebook, blurring ink, and it felt like baptism. The storm quieted, not with forgiveness but with fatigue. The crowd slowed their venom, some curious, some gone. Marcus disappeared, leaving only silence where his orders once barked. Lila said, now you can breathe, Ava. I inhaled deeply, the first full breath in years. I said, I don't know what's left of me without them. She answered, what's left is the only part that matters. The ghost whispered, I am not your enemy anymore. My hands trembled as I closed the apps and reached for paper. I wrote a sentence, not for likes, not for sponsors, but for me. The words felt clumsy but alive. I whispered, maybe this is freedom. For once the silence didn't strangle. It cradled. My following was smaller now, a fraction of what it was. But the comments shifted. Less noise, more whispers of gratitude. A stranger wrote, I stayed because you finally sound human. I cried harder than I had at the hate. Lila called, her voice warm, this is the anchor you were searching for. I said, I don't know how to rebuild, but I don't need to fake it anymore. The crowd's roar was gone, replaced by small, steady voices. Sloane mocked the drop in my numbers, but her words bounced off me. The ghost whispered, your stage is smaller, but it is real. For the first time, I didn't long for millions. I longed for truth, and I had it. Brands no longer called. The contracts vanished like smoke. I thought I would break, but instead I felt lighter. Marcus's silence was freedom disguised as punishment. I said, without them, I still write. Lila laughed. That's all that matters. The crowd's remaining voices cheered my scraps of honesty, fragile but true. Sloane tried to bury me under her spotlight, but I saw how hollow it looked. The ghost whispered, they cannot own me anymore. I stayed up late, writing by hand until ink smudged across my wrist. I said, even if no one reads this, it belongs to me. The words were shaky, imperfect, but real. For once that was enough. The messages from strangers began to shift. Some said your words helped me face my own lies. I froze, realizing my brokenness was a bridge. Lila said, do you see it now? Your cracks connect, they don't destroy. I said, maybe I wasn't built for perfection. The crowd was no longer a mob, but a small circle, holding me without demanding polish. Sloane's sharp edges grew dull as her taunts lost traction. Marcus faded further into irrelevance. The ghost whispered, you are finally letting me breathe. I stared at my notebook and realized I was not just surviving. I was beginning again, and this time with no mask. I sat in front of the camera again, no lights, no makeup, no script. I said, I don't know what comes next, but I know I will not lie again. The words felt like closing one book and opening another. The crowd that remained listened without demand. Lila messaged, that's the only promise that matters. The ghost whispered, now, I am not haunting you. I am you. For the first time I smiled on camera and meant it. Marcus was gone, Sloane irrelevant, the noise muted. All that remained was me, raw and real. I said, this is not a brand. This is me. And for once I believed myself. I woke to a smaller world and a steadier pulse. The crowd no longer roared. It murmured, I said, I can live with quiet. Lila said, quiet is where real work breathes. I brewed coffee and watched the window bead with rain. Sloane posted another victory lap, but it skimmed past like static. Marcus was gone, a ghost of contracts and pressure. I read a message from a stranger who said my mess helped them tell the truth at dinner. My chest warmed in a place no metric could measure. The ghost whispered, "You kept me alive." I answered, "You kept me human." I opened my notebook and wrote a line that felt like a sunrise. I did not need applause for it to matter. I needed breath, paper, and time. I had all three. I filmed a short video without polish. I said, I am learning to speak like myself. The words did not shake. Lila replied in the comments, "Proud of you." I smiled and let it stay. The crowd offered quiet nods and thoughtful lines. A few barbs slid through, but they did not pierce. Sloane tried to bait me with a duet. I chose silence and felt powerful. Marcus's last email sat unread, a relic with no teeth. I walked outside and let the weather decide my hair. The ghost whispered, "This is living without a script." I said, "Then let's keep it messy." The day did not trend. It breathed. I recorded a second take and deleted it. The first was enough. For once, enough felt rich. Letters began to arrive, honest and unbranded. A teacher said my confession sparked a classroom talk about masks. A nurse said she finally wrote her first poem. I read each one and felt weight lift. Lila said, "Your reach changed shape, not worth." I nodded and filed the letters in a shoebox. The crowd had faces now. They were fewer, but they were clear. Sloane posted a glossy brand trip, and I wished her peace instead of pain. Marcus remained a silence I did not need to fill. The ghost whispered, "You are building with softer bricks." I touched the notebook spine like a promise. I said, "No more pretending." The room answered with stillness that held. I wrote a post that asked nothing. I said, "If you are still here, thank you." It felt like a bow without performance. Lila sent a voice note, small and gleaming with joy. The crowd answered sparingly, with care. A few asked for more chaos, but I let the request drift. Sloane's algorithm glittered at the edges of my feed. I scrolled past with a gentle hand. The ghost whispered, "You do not owe them fire to prove you are warm." I laughed and kept writing. I walked to the park and left my phone in my pocket. Someone recognized me and did not ask for a selfie. They said, "Be well." I said, "I am trying," and meant it. I faced the lens one last time and felt no tremor. I said I wanted to be remembered. Now I want to be real. The words fell clean. Lila texted a heart that needed no caption. The crowd listened and did not demand a twist. I breathed and chose an ending without spectacle. I said, "This account may sleep for a while." The ghost whispered, "We will write where no one can grade us." I nodded and reached forward. I said, "And that's why you will not see me online again." The sentence landed like a soft door closing. Silence answered, warm and decisive. I turned off the light and kept the pen.